Two cousins plan a truck hijacking together. One of them shows up. The other has a panic attack the night before, passes out, cracks his skull open, and never makes it to the job. The one who showed up goes to prison for the better part of 2 decades. The one who didn't goes on to become the boss of an entire crime family. That's not backstory. That's the whole engine of everything that happens to Tony Blundetto. And by the time you understand it, you'll understand exactly why going straight was never really a fair fight. Tony Blundetto and Tony Soprano aren't just cousins in the loose, extended family sense. This show usually means when it says family. They grew up together on their uncle's farm, practically raised as brothers, close enough in age that people who knew them both struggled to tell their stories apart. They used to gang up on a younger Christopher Moltisanti together, the way older cousins do. When the show introduces Tony B in season 5, it's introducing someone who's supposed to already be one of the most important relationships of Tony Soprano's life, which is a strange thing to do for a show 5 seasons in, and worth sitting with for a second, because the show does it on purpose. It wants you to feel like you're only now being let in on something Tony's been quietly carrying the entire time. Here's what he's been carrying. The hijacking happened decades earlier, and Tony Soprano was supposed to be there. He wasn't because of a panic attack, the same condition that opens the entire series, that sends him into Dr. Melfi's office in the pilot episode over a family of ducks in his backyard pool. What most viewers don't initially realize is that the roots of that condition trace back to this exact night, an argument with his mother that left him unconscious with a cracked skull instead of standing next to his cousin during an armed robbery. Tony B went ahead. Tony B got caught, and for years afterward, Tony Soprano let his cousin believe a lie, that he'd been jumped and knocked out by strangers on his way to the job. Nothing more. Not the truth. Not that his own mother's cruelty had physically taken him down hours before his cousin needed him most. While Tony B served his sentence, his marriage collapsed. His daughter ran away from home while he was locked up, growing up almost entirely without him. Meanwhile, Tony Soprano prospered, became a captain, then a boss, bought a house with a pool, sent his own daughter to an Ivy League school. 2 cousins, one shared plan, and only one of them paid for it, while the other built an entire life on the version of freedom that plan was supposed to buy them both. That asymmetry is the real subject of this story. More than any single crime, Tony B eventually commits. When he's finally released in 2004, part of a wave of high-profile mobsters the media nicknames the Class of 2004, released alongside Feech Lamanna and the Lupertazzi family's Phil Leotardo, Tony B does something genuinely rare for this show. He says no. Tony Soprano offers to bring him straight into the business, lines up a stolen airbag scheme ready and waiting for him, and Tony B turns it down. He's developed an interest in massage therapy during his time inside, of all things, and he wants to actually build something legitimate this time. Tony's disappointed, but he respects it enough to get him a straight job anyway, delivering linens for a laundry business run by a Korean immigrant named Kim, who initially can't stand him, openly distrustful of a white ex-con, until he learns what Tony B is actually working toward, and starts warming to him, even offering him a real partnership once he's licensed. For a while, it actually looks like it might work. He's got a supportive girlfriend, Gwen, someone he met while still inside, who helps him study for his state licensing exam. He passes it. He's doing the thing almost nobody in this show's universe successfully does, building an entirely new identity out from under the old one. And then he finds a bag of cash thrown out of a car window by a panicking street dealer who thinks he's about to get pulled over. Just found money, sitting there in the road, no plan behind it, no crime he had to commit to get it. This is the moment worth slowing down on, because it's not really about the money itself. It's about what that money proves to him, instantly and viscerally, in a way that a linen delivery route never could. That the old life is still right there, still just as easy as it always was. Still capable of handing him more in one lucky afternoon than months of legitimate work. The massage license, the slow architecture of a rebuilt life with Kim and Gwen, none of that can compete with a feeling like that. Legitimate life asks you to trust that patience will eventually add up to something. Crime just hands you the something, immediately, with no waiting required. From there, the unraveling is fast. He starts gambling, starts partying. After a fight with Gwen on the phone, he takes his frustration out physically on Kim, the one man who'd actually given him a real chance. He swallows his pride, goes to Tony Soprano, and asks if that stolen airbag scheme is still available. But Tony, driven by his own buried guilt, goes a step further. He doesn't just pull his cousin back into the family. He hands him the keys to the Bloomfield Avenue casino. It's a highly lucrative, illegal gambling racket, a massive cash cow handed directly to a guy who isn't even a made man, infuriating the rest of the crew. But here's what makes this more than a simple relapse story, more than just a guy who couldn't resist temptation. Once Tony B is actually back inside the business, he's still resentful, still feels like he's playing catch-up, even in the criminal world, even after everything. When Angelo Garep, a friend he made in prison, and a Lupertazzi capo named Rusty Milio offer him a contract to kill a man named Joey Peeps, as part of the power struggle tearing through the New York family. After their boss's death, Tony B initially says no. He only changes his mind once he decides he isn't rising fast enough under his own cousin. That's the detail that reframes everything. This isn't a man pulled back into crime purely by the thrill of easy money. It's a man who spent the better part of 2 decades in prison watching, from a cell, as his cousin built an entire empire out of the plan they were supposed to build together. And even now, back on the outside, still feels like he's losing that race. He kills Joey Peeps and the woman with him, eliminating a witness. In the chaos of the shooting, the car rolls over his own foot, leaving him with a limp he can't fully hide. Tony Soprano notices it almost immediately. Tony B lies, claims he was jumped collecting a debt. And then Johnny Sack, over a casual round of golf, mentions offhand that a witness saw the shooter limping away from the scene. And Tony Soprano puts it together instantly, hard enough to trigger a panic attack of his own. What Tony does next tells you everything about the actual shape of his guilt. He doesn't turn his cousin in. He builds him a false alibi at real political cost, covering up the hit and buying his cousin time he probably doesn't deserve. And not long after, in a session that ranks among the rawest therapy scenes the show ever filmed, Tony finally says the truth out loud, not to Tony B, but to Dr. Melfi, that the mugging story was always a lie, that the real reason he never showed up that night was a panic attack after a fight with his mother, a collapse he was too ashamed to ever admit to anyone. He's carried that guilt for the better part of 2 decades, quietly believing his cousin's entire ruined life was his fault, and he's never once said it to the one person it was actually about. He still doesn't say it to that person, not yet. The dominoes are already falling too fast for it to matter. In retaliation for the Joey Peeps hit, New York murders Angelo Garip, Tony B's closest friend from his time inside, someone who'd become something close to a father figure to him in prison. And that's what actually breaks him. Driven by pure grief, Tony B goes rogue, tracks down Phil Leotardo and his younger brother Billy on a New York street, and shoots them both, killing Billy. It's an unsanctioned, unauthorized execution of a made man, and it drags the entire New Jersey family into a war nobody chose, and nobody can walk back. Now the cost of protecting him becomes impossible to sustain. When New York demands Tony hand his cousin over, he refuses, bleeding respect from his own men with every day he holds the line. It's only once Phil puts one of Tony's own captains in the hospital that Tony finally accepts there's no version of this where his cousin survives. Tony B calls him from hiding to apologize. And this is where Tony finally says it to the person it was always supposed to be for, that the mugging story was a lie, that he missed the hijacking because of a panic attack, not an assault, that he's felt guilty about it every year since. Now he tells him, they're even. Tony B, quiet, asks if that's the real reason behind everything his cousin did for him since he got out. Tony doesn't really answer. They tell each other to take care. Tony has the call traced, finds him at their Uncle Pat's old farm, the same place they used to wander as kids, cigar smoke, and a fishing pond, decades before either of them had a criminal record. Tony B comes back from a grocery run, and Tony's waiting for him on the porch with a shotgun. He doesn't say anything else. He just does it, the most painful thing he does in the entire series, precisely because it's the most loving. So go back to the actual question. Why couldn't Tony Blundetto stay away from that life? The easy answer is that crime is a hard habit to break, and that's true as far as it goes. But this show is arguing something colder and more specific than that. It's arguing that re-entry into a legitimate life was never really a fair contest to begin with, not against a legitimate laundry job that pays slowly and asks for patience, competing against a criminal world that had already taken everything from him once and was fully prepared to hand a fraction of it back immediately, in cash, with no waiting required. Tony B didn't fail to go straight because he lacked willpower. He failed because the entire architecture of his situation, the resentment, the stolen decades, the cousin who'd built a kingdom on the same plan that ruined him, made going straight cost more than it could ever plausibly pay back. And the tragedy underneath the tragedy is that the one man positioned to actually understand why, the one man carrying the true story that might have changed something, sat on it in silence until the night it was already too late to matter.